One Wonderful. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see folks. As I'm chatting and, as I'm speaking, I would love if you can type in the chat box what you're studying, and that will allow, us and the panelists, have a better sense of who's all here. And so you're absolutely welcome to do that. And so my name is Pauline. I am a recruiter at CNA. I am really thrilled to be here. I am an alum of Trachtenberg for my master's. And today we're going to use this time to really share about CNA, share about what we do. And we have three of my colleagues here who will share about CNA, their role, their work. And at the very end, we will have Q&A. So you're absolutely welcome to ask us anything, hold your questions till the end if you'd like. If you don't want to ask it out loud, you're welcome to, message myself directly, all the usual things. So before I pass it over to our first speaker, I want to just introduce folks. And so we have, like I said, three people, and I want to make sure we could do a view. I think you could see all. Oh, yeah, there you go. Thank you. And so we'll do a spotlight there. And so the first person I have here, Dr. Ryan Baker. Ryan, do you mind giving a wave or awesome. There's Ryan. So he's a research scientist at CNA with a special expertise in research design and program evaluation, international security, and the Marine Corps. And as part of CNA's scientific analyst program, he serves as the primary liaison between CNA and Training and Education Command, which is a three-star Marine Corps command in Virginia. And as we noted at the beginning, Ryan received his MA in 2012 from GW's Elliott School of International Affairs, and then his PhD in 2020 from GW's Trachtenberg School. And then our second colleague of ours, Darlene Onara. She is, do you mind giving a wave, Darlene? There's Darlene, is an associate research analyst in our Indo-Pacific Security Affairs program. Her expertise is in US-Japan relations, Japanese defense and foreign policy, and Northeast Asian security affairs. Her projects focus on the political military dynamics of U.S. allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific maritime security cooperation and regional media analyses. She earned her MA in International Affairs with a concentration in U.S. foreign policy from the Elliott School of International Affairs. And then Danny Andrews, do you mind? There she is. Is a research analyst in our Navy Human Resources program. Her expertise is in prevention of destructive behaviors, developing a training curriculum, and personnel development. She joined CNA after serving as a Peace Corps volunteer in Burkina Faso, focusing on community economic development. While working for us, she earned her MA in public policy with a concentration in program evaluation from GW's Trachtenberg School. So as you could see, a variety of folks of different areas for you to interact with. And so what I'm going to do now is I will share my screen and pass it over to Ryan. And let me go ahead and do that really quickly. Let's see. Okay, Ryan, let me see here, making sure. Can you verbally tell me all good? You could see it?
Oh, I could see it. I can't see it anymore.
Oh, my bad. Let's try that again. Let's try this again.
There you go.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, so I'm just going to give a very, very quick overview of CNA, sort of an oversimplified version of the organization. So we're a small-ish research organization in Arlington, Virginia. I say small-ish, we're a few hundred folks, but when you compare us to other people that do this kind of work, we're on the smaller side. We do work almost exclusively for the federal government, a heavy dose of which is for the Department of Defense. And for that reason, we predominantly hire people that are able to get and maintain a U.S. security clearance. So just something to keep in mind as you're thinking about CNA. There are two big divisions within CNA. One is called the Center for Naval Analyses that does work mostly for the Department of Defense. And then there's another sort of center called the Institute for Public Research that does work primarily for things like the FAA and other government organizations, FEMA, and that kind of work. And I guess that's about it. I guess one way to think about us is we sort of sit within a gray area, kind of between government civil servants and traditional contractors. One way I think about this is like we're a heavily regulated nonprofit. We are a private company technically, but we are constrained to do certain kinds of work for certain kinds of customers. And that puts us in the category of something called a federally funded research and development center. And so that's who we are. If you Google FFRDC or Federally Funded Research and Development Center, you'll see that there are a few dozen of those out there. They come in slightly different varieties. We're a studies and analysis FFRDC. And so we do predominantly studies and analyses. So, and then I'll save the rest for Q&A. So back over to you, Pauline.
Wonderful. And you could see here a lot of diversity in academic background. And we have folks out in the field. A lot of these, just a sampling of areas that you could see. And so I will pause and pass it over to Darlene. I'm sharing my screen, so if you don't mind letting me know verbally if you could see this, Darlene.
Yeah, sounds good. Sorry,
Awesome.
can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. As Pauline introduced, my name is Darlene, and I'll be talking about one of our many divisions, the China and Indo-Pacific Security Affairs Division, which I'm a part of. Yes. So this division is one of 6 divisions within the Center of Naval Analyses. Specifically, I am an associate research analyst at CIP. And so just a little bit about CIP. For over 20 years, the division has provided its sponsors with a single point of entry into CNA for political, military, analytic and other supports focused on the People's Republic of China, as well as in the US's Indo-Pacific allies and partners, and related to that security trends in the region. And so within our work for our sponsors, we also provide research analysis to policymakers, warfighters, and intelligence officials as well. And so within CIP, previous slide, yeah. So within CIP, there's about 3 dozen or so analysts. Most of us have professional level Mandarin proficiency. It's something that we test for during the interview process, but a lot of us also have proficiency in other Asian languages, such as myself, I speak Japanese. There are some analysts who also speak Korean and other sorts of Asian languages as well. And so CIP has 5 major lines of effort that you can see here. So the first is our China component, which I can talk a little bit more in the next slide. The Indo-Pacific component, which is pretty much anything other than China, so all those other countries, which I can talk more about in the next slide as well. And we also focus a lot on economic statecraft in recent years. A lot of our projects have focused on PRC, economic coercion, coercive tactics, and technology acquisition, supply chains, critical infrastructure. Those sorts of topics have been a focus for CIP in recent years. And then there's also regional engagement. So a lot of our focus is connecting with allies and partners in the region and having dialogue with scholars and sort of other sort of experts in the region to maintain that sort of communication flow. And then lastly, strategic communications is kind of related. A lot of our projects focus on how China and also Indo-Pacific countries are perceiving US activities in the region to sort of better our perspective of how we understand how they view our regional engagements and our efforts. Next slide, please. So within CIP, there's 2 different teams. There's the China Studies Program, and then there's the Indo-Pacific Security Affairs Program. So I'm specifically a part of the Indo-Pacific Security Affairs Program, which is the smaller of the 2 teams. So the China Studies program, as you can imagine, it focuses predominantly on China to include topics such as China's military modernization, as I mentioned before, China's economic statecraft, and just a whole wide variety of topics related to China. And the Indo-Pacific Security Affairs Program focuses on those other countries, such as Japan, the Philippines, South Korea, pretty much Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands. So it's just sort of that other component from China. And so just to briefly mention some of the types of work that we do in IPS, which is Indo-Pacific Security Affairs. So one major line of work that we focus on is sort of mapping the Indo-Pacific media and information environment. And so within that, we have projects that focus on specific media outlets in the Pacific region, allies and partners, again, just like how they're viewing US military operations, activities and investments in the region, how their media sort of portraying US activity, just to get a better understanding of how they're viewing US activities and how we can sort of better understand really our allies and partners. Another major line of work is ally and partner interoperability issues. So this is more of that hard military component. So focusing on US defense engagements with different countries, focusing on where specifically we align, and if there's areas where we don't align, how can we improve alignment and coordination together to better interoperability. So we focus on US-Japan interoperability, US, South Korea, Philippines, those sorts of partnerships. And then lastly, another effort that IPS does is Track 1.5 dialogues. So for those of you who don't know, a Track 1.5 dialogue is a dialogue composed of governments, representatives from the government, and then from non-governmental sort of sectors coming together to speak on certain topics or issues. So we hold a lot of Track 1.5 dialogues in the region with all sorts of countries. Vietnam is one that happened recently. We do a lot in the Pacific Islands as well, with Tonga recently, and other sorts of countries to just maintain our communication and cooperation between each other. So yeah, that's a little bit about CIP and IPS, and yeah, moving on to Danielle.
Thanks so much, Darlene. Let me move forward here.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a second of our 6 divisions, which is Resources and Force Readiness Division, which I'm a part of. All right, so the Resources and Force Readiness Division focuses mainly on personnel issues. So we do a lot of work for the Navy, the Marine Corps, which is obviously Center for Naval Analysis, our main focus. But we also do work for other services, Army, Air Force, Coast Guard, and I should have added newly the Space Force, but also the Office of Secretary of Defense. So a lot of overarching work over this different services. We have 3 research programs at CNA. They're the Energy, Infrastructure, and Environment Program, the Marine Corps and Defense Workforce Program, and the Navy Human Resources Program, which I'm a part of, and we'll get into on the next slide. The Energy Infrastructure, the Energy, Infrastructure, and Environment Program deals mostly with, exactly like it says, infrastructure in the services, anything that personnel interact with, such as shipyards, training environments, anything like that, bases, anything like that, that they come into contact with. The Marine Corps and Defense Workforce Program work mainly with personnel issues for anything that is not the Navy specific. So anything having to do with Marine Corps, OSC, Army, Air Force, they'll work with personnel issues with those services. And then Navy Human Resources takes the bulk of the Navy personnel work. And we work with a bunch of different types of commands, recruiting commands, training commands, which Ryan is our liaison for the Marine Corps, and then any of the personnel commands that deal with quality of life. Like Pauline mentioned, I do a lot with disruptive behavior, so anything like preventing suicide, substance abuse, any kind of personal issues like that that the military deals with, and then anything like compensation issues or problem filling certain billets. We do a lot of work with that. And if we move on. All right, so the Navy Human Resources Program, like I said, deals mainly with the Navy specifically. So anything to do with recruiting, training, retaining, educating their people. And we have a wide variety of expertise on our team. So I see a lot of focuses over in the chat that we employ mostly economists, I would say, but we also have systems engineers, operational engineers, industrial engineers, data scientists, public policy, a whole group of people. So that seems to match well. And like I said, the common issue areas that we deal with are recruitment and retention, personnel readiness, we're finding metrics in examining practice that do fit and fill levels, so making sure billets are filled but not having an excess of people, and then health analytics and medical readiness. So anything dealing with the healthcare of our service members, we talk about as well.
Before moving forward, can you share what a billet is?
Oh, sorry. Yes. A billet is basically a job slot. So the government will allocate a certain number of spots to do certain jobs, be in certain locations, and just making sure that they're getting the right number of people, the right type of people in the right places can be tricky when, they're dealing with at the level that they are. So we help them with that. And I will turn it over to Ryan.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so I'm in the Operational Warfighting Division at CNA, which I think is one of our larger divisions, and it covers kind of a lot of ground. It's basically focused on anything and everything that can help make the Navy and the Marine Corps a little bit more effective on the battlefield. So because that's kind of a broad remit, we employ a sort of broad range of skill sets. So we have chemists, we have engineers, we have biologists, we have people like me that are social scientists, and we're all kind of working together to try to figure out how to do things a little bit more efficiently or effectively in that context. Within the Operational Warfighting Division, I think there are, I want to say 6 teams. Pauline, can you advance the slide one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, so 6 teams or research programs within the Operational Warfighting Division. The Expeditionary Warfare Division is focused primarily on Marine Corps operations specifically. Special activities and intelligence, for example, if you skip down a few, is focused on the intelligence community, but also special operations and some sort of things in that world. We have a wargaming team. We have a whole team that just is sort of focused on designing, building, facilitating war games. That falls under our Operational Warfighting Division here. Organizations' roles and missions is kind of like the way that different organizations within the Navy and the Marine Corps and OSD, but predominantly the Navy and Marine Corps are organized and how they might be organized more effectively to do different things. Personally, I sit in the Operational Training and Readiness team, hence why I'm the primary liaison to the Marine Corps Training and Education Command, because we're focused on sort of collective training and how we can improve collective training for the Navy and the Marine Corps, but my portfolio focuses on the Marine Corps. And so we help them with things like designing exercises to help collect certain kinds of data, how to analyze that data, what kind of data you might need to collect, what kind of training is more likely to be effective than not, where you should conduct that training, what kinds of things should be realistic and what kinds of things can be a little bit less realistic depending on the situation. We do a lot of work on something called live virtual constructive training environments, which is a bit of jargon, but just sort of the mix of like live training that you do in real life versus stuff that can be done in a computer or in a virtual environment, and then how you collect data on ranges and things like that. So that's a very brief overview of a very broad portfolio of work, but I want to turn it back over to you so that we can get to Q&A.
Yeah, before I move forward, I also wanted to just highlight what we spoke about at the very beginning. What Ryan mentioned is CNA. We have, these two different business units. Today we covered the essentially the team that manages all of our defense portfolio. So we talked about China, Indo-Pacific, operational warfare, resources, and force readiness. The other side of the house, where we have different colleagues not on this call, are folks who work on the non-defense portfolio. So work with state, local, federal agencies, FEMA, et cetera. So I know Ryan mentioned that at the beginning, but we also cover a wide range of non-defense as well. So I will pause. Let me just go advance to the next slide. We would love to use this time to, we have ample time to share, answer any questions that you might have, direct it to any or all. On this page, there's some emails and links and things like that. We're on, I think, all of the social media's platforms. I just put a few there. But I will go to chat and see if there's anybody. And also feel free to just unmute yourself and ask a question if you have any. So let me just go ahead and
Yeah, we don't have anybody yet in the chat. I
No
didn't see
worries.
any questions that came in, but if people want to either unmute themselves or just raise your hand, use the react and raise your hand. So if we have multiple questions, it would be great.
And for folks,
Go ahead.
yeah, sorry. I was going to say for folks who are joining in late in the chat, if you have not yet done so, please put in what are you studying, and that'll be sort of like a icebreaker if you don't mind putting in your field of study.
Great. Looks like Robert has raised his hand. We'll start with him.
I think the deadline for the summer internship is coming up. Is there anything that any of you want to share related to that?
I could take that. So November 30th, right around the corner, is the deadline for our internships. We have internships both starting in the summer, and we have a flexible start date. So we have some interns starting in early next year, so not summer. Depending on the specific role, some require at least a bachelor's degree, junior, et cetera. So junior and undergrad or higher. So take a look at the requirements. We have a lot of different opportunities. I know that we are starting to screen now. So if you want to get your application in, and if you have any questions, you're absolutely welcome. And I'll put my email there as well.
Looking for other questions from people. Someone put the link for the openings in the chat if that's possible.
Yep, I will do that now.
That is great. This is your chance to ask questions, any and all questions for HR perspective, as well as our panelists. Is it pronounced Machias?
Yeah, but you can call me Mickey. Sorry, I joined in late, but I already applied to the research intern for the AI ML emerging technology, and I was just hoping, like, I read the job description, but just talk a little bit more about that position.
So if you can you type your name, because I cannot find you in the speaking. So can you just chat your name so I know your first and last name? I am not the recruiter for all of our roles. We actually have a few different recruiters that handle the different business units, as I mentioned. That role, Machias, thank you. ENDAL, thank you. So that role is actually part of the other team, as I mentioned. So this group of colleagues that are on the call with me are all part of the FFRDC, or the federally funded research side of the house. That is more of our defense, and that role that you're looking at is part of the public sector side. That doesn't matter, but just giving you context. I'm happy to sort of check to see where the status is for them. And then if you'd like to shoot me an email, you're welcome to.
I'll do that. Thank you.
Other questions? Bogdan?
Yeah, I'm an undergraduate student in engineering doing systems, and I'm wondering if you guys have any positions related to data science or just engineering in general for undergraduate students? Because I see that the majority of them require to already have your bachelor's degree. And I'm wondering if there are any openings in that area.
I could continue to jump in, but anybody else is welcome. So our full-time roles do often require at least a bachelor's or higher. And a lot of that has to do with just making sure that that individual comes in with the training that is needed with that specific degree, whether that's, like you said, system engineering or not. If you don't have your bachelor's degree yet, there are internships, as we mentioned, and those are the ones that you would be qualified for applying.
Yeah, I'll just jump in
No,
to
because
add.
even
Oh, go
under
ahead.
the internships, it says that it requires to have your degree. So these are graduate level internships. I'm wondering if there are any undergraduate level research internships. That's mainly the main question that I had.
Not for that team, not for that role. So to answer your question really quickly, that specific job that you're looking at does ask for at least a bachelor's. Maybe in the future, but as of right now, I don't know of any present research specific roles that are undergrad.
I was just going to add, sort of looking forward to the future, we do have a whole division here at CNA, the data science division, that is devoted to that kind of work. And so there, if you eventually get your bachelor's degree and maybe continue on with your education a little bit more, that is a large and growing portfolio for us, and we do a lot of work in the data science space.
Josephine has raised her hand. We'll go with her.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tim, for being here. I'm a doctoral student studying cybersecurity analytics here at GW, and I was wondering, from a cybersecurity perspective, where do you usually see professionals with that background fall into? Like, what kind of groups are they usually part of?
To clarify, you mean what kind of groups here at CNA, or what kind of groups in general?
No, at CNA.
That's a great. So I will say that there's a lot, and feel free to jump in here, my colleagues on the call. But my sense is there's a lot of intermixing here at CNA. Like, so where I sit, I'm in the operational warfighting division, and I'm on the particular operational training and readiness team. But if you look at my calendar on any given day, I'm working across divisions. I do a fair amount of work with RFR, for example. I'm going down to Quantico later to do a brief that is RFR supported. I've done some work with the data science division and elsewhere. So there's probably a place where you're more likely to land with that background than others. But one of the things that CNA is pretty good at is not pigeonholing you within that particular spot of the organization if that's not a good fit for you, or if you happen to have skill sets that match in other things that we're working on. So I could imagine you falling into a number of different places here at CNA with that background. So I hesitate to actually throw one out. I mean, you might not end up on the wargaming team. How about that? That might not be where you land, but there are a lot of other places where I think you would be a good fit, and you would be able to have, you would not be confined to that space. If that makes sense.
Okay, that's good. And with that in mind, are there opportunities maybe for like rotation, or it just comes naturally if you have a background in like cybersecurity? The understanding is that you're pretty flexible in your skill set, and the team can pretty much leverage your expertise whenever needed, depending on the project.
Yeah, so the projects as they come in will, it's a function of like, what are you already working on? How much availability do you have? What are your interests? What kind of projects are coming in? And so it's an elaborate negotiation to figure out what you're working on any given day. But over time, you'll have a fair amount of independence, particularly as you learn more about the organization, to move into and sort of time it such that you can work on things that you're really interested in. And if that ends up pulling you to another division, there's nothing stopping you. There's a lot of movement internally at CNA. You can go to the field, for example, and do a tour out there. You can maybe do a tour in the Pentagon. You can come back. You can jump to a different division. So there's a fair amount of internal movement within the organization. It's maybe slower than some other organizations in the sense that like our projects are typically a year or more. And so you might, you'll be working on that for some period of time, but then you line up your next one and maybe that's in a slightly different space. But certainly the possibility is there.
Right there. Okay, that's exciting. Thank you.
Sure.
Always love hearing something's exciting. Pauline, were you going to add something before I went over to Jared?
Yeah, just really quickly, in addition to our two amazing, research business units that we discussed today, which is our bread and butter, we also have a corporate team. And our corporate team hires, folks with a very technical cyber background. So we have a whole chief information office. Within that information office, there's physical security, cybersecurity, all the things that I could think of. My brain just clicked out, but you get what I'm saying. So there's the more non-research based application of your cybersecurity as well. So
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Great. And Jared has his hand raised.
Hello, just want to start off and say thank you. I appreciate you all taking the time. I'm currently working with RTX Raytheon, and my manager, she has given me full autonomy. She knows my career goals and aspirations. She went through the GW program. Currently a senior procurement analyst. I heard you guys mention something about supply chain, and I'm curious to see if there's an ability to leverage the knowledge of supply chain and procurement, with my secret clearance, with my master's degree in cybersecurity policy and compliance as well. And or if there's more opportunity within the supply chain as well.
I guess I can speak to this a little bit. So I think you're referring to the CIP portion of it where some of our line of work relates to supply chains. So I think the answer is yes. I think that your background sounds really perfect for working on that sort of work at CNA. From my understanding of our supply chain work, it mostly has to deal with how to or more so supply chain security in times of conflict and crisis is something that we're looking at. And that can include things like semiconductors or sort of critical other critical supply chains. So I know for sure that's one huge aspect that we're looking at. I'm not sure about others, but yeah, I hope that answers your question pretty well, or I can elaborate further if needed.
Nope, that's great. Thank you.
I can maybe also hop in from our side. Our energy infrastructure team does occasionally have I worked on one project where we're looking at fuel shipping logistics in actually the Indo-PACOM area for the Navy. I would say that when with really maybe niche concentrations like that, we might not always have a project that speaks exactly directly to that niche interest. And when it does come up, maybe you'd be, the first person they think of to be put on it, but maybe there's not always something that speaks exactly to that specific interest. But like Ryan said, CNA is a really good place to maybe you can branch out, explore what you want, see how your interests and skills maybe can fit in ways that you didn't previously think of. So, being on that team, it will pop up and you'll be put on it. But when there's not, maybe that's an opportunity to kind of see how your skills can apply elsewhere.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in as well. So and sort of riff on what was just said, but you have to strike a good balance, I think, at CNA between being a generalist and a specialist, right? Because you're not going to be able to work on the same thing over and over and over again. So even if don't over specialize too much. I mean, it's good to have a specialty and some deep knowledge of a particular subject, but you're almost certainly going to be working on multiple projects at any given time that sort of span an issue area. So having expertise is good, but also being able to have some underlying sort of methodological training and expertise is very valuable because that's something that applies across projects. So, but you will sort of get to do lots of different things, which is good. But if you're only interested in doing one thing, then it's going to be a poor fit, I think, especially early on, and not just at CNA, but also at the other FFRDCs that have a very similar model.
Thank you.
Great. We have great questions coming in. Aditya, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly. I apologize.
Now you got it. So I know Pauline had mentioned that CNA has like a long-term relationship with a lot of the funders, but how, and this is for everyone on the panel, like how do specific projects that people are actually working on get started and spun up? Is there like a business development team that tries to do that? Is it like senior researchers developing a relationship with someone in the government and then it's like a line item, or like I'm just sort of wondering how these projects actually start, especially ones that might not be super long term.
Yeah, so I can take a swing at this, Pauline, if you'd like. The shorter answer is there are a lot of different ways that projects come to us. One of the unique things about being an FFRDC is that a certain amount of our budget comes directly out of the federal budget every year. You can look up the president's budget submission, and if you dig down deep enough, you'll find a line in there for the Center for Naval Analysis. And so we get a certain amount of money each year through that process. That's not enough to cover all of our expenses or our revenues or anything, but it does help. And then there's a process, and it's a different process in the Navy and the Marine Corps for allocating that money against particular demand signals within the services. We also have ways to occasionally Congress will direct the Department of Defense to do a study, and then we will compete with the other FFRDCs to do that study, and sometimes we'll get it, and then we'll get money to do that project. Sometimes it's just through like old school business development, right? You build a relationship or you have an existing relationship, and then somebody's like, hey, I would really like for you to do this study for me, and I have the resources to pay you to do it. Is there a mechanism for that? And the answer is yes. Usually there's some restrictions there. We can't always accept money. So the short answer is there are a variety of different ways, but when you add them all together, that becomes the pot that is our funding stream. One of the other quirks of being an FFRDC is there's a ceiling on how much money we can take in each year. And that's when I mentioned earlier, we're a heavily regulated nonprofit. That's one of the regulations, and it's designed to sort of dampen the profit motive to keep us working in the long-term interest of the Department of the Navy. So there's a certain limit on how much we can grow. There's a certain limit on how many studies we can do every year, and that's tied to how much money we can bring in each year. So I hope that answers your question.
I just had a quick follow-up on that. So you mentioned the like old school business development piece. How much of an expectation is it if you're a researcher at CNA to be going out and sort of generating new projects?
It varies with your tenure here and your rank, for lack of a better word, within the organization. So for new hires, there's virtually no expectation. But then after you've been here for a while and you've developed those relationships, then there's more of an expectation. But again, it's nothing comparable to like a traditional contractor where all of your income has to come through that mechanism. So it's not quite as it will never be as sort of acute as it is at some of those other organizations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Looks like we have Queen Esther.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you to the panel for coming here and taking the time to spend time with us. My question is, when an applicant applies but is not selected, do you suggest other opportunities that you believe may be better fit for them?
I could speak to this. We keep all resumes in our system. So as a recruiter, if you're not fit for, or that, with our very depth of our applicant pool aren't selected for that specific role, I personally frequently will go back in and see, okay, we have this role coming up, and we will reach out if there's a fit. We won't necessarily email you before we have an open role, but if there is a role, absolutely, we want to get that filled with the best people. So we would.
Thank you so much for the answer, Ms. Paulina.
We have just 3 minutes left. Does anybody have any? These have been great questions. Any final questions or anything from Pauline or the panelists? Before we wrap up? Well, if not, I'm going to again express my appreciation to all of you, to Pauline, Ryan, Danielle, and Darlene. It's always wonderful for myself and for students to hear more insights than we can just get from reading about an organization, to really get an understanding about fit, culture, mission, employment. So it's just very, very insightful. And we just want to thank you all for what you do and for continuing to want to give back and share with George Washington University. Thank you.